Hello everyone, and welcome to our lesson on parallel line relationships. So just a quick refresher on what are parallel lines. Remember that parallel lines never cross. So in geometry, parallel lines can be defined as two or more lines in the same plane that are at equal distance from each other and never cross. Another way to say that is that they face the same direction. So I might say that these two lines are parallel. And how I mark that is with those arrows or those triangles. So I could say A is parallel to B. And then I have another set of lines that are facing a different direction, but I might add two arrows to show that those are parallel to each other. So X is parallel to Y. So today we're going to be looking at what happens when parallel lines get hit by a transversal. So before we discuss that, we need to discuss what a transversal is. So a transversal is a line that intersects a set of lines. So we would call this line, this purple line, T, that is a transversal, because it intersects the blue line at this point, this blue point, and it intersects the pink line at this point. And what happens when you have a transversal is that four sets of angles get created around each intersection. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 is one set, 5, 6, 7, and 8 is another set. And I want you to think back to what we learned a few units ago, which is that these vertical angles are going to be congruent to each other. So 1 and 4 are going to be congruent, as well as 2 and 3. Now, if the lines are not parallel, then this other set is going to also have a set of vertical angles, but it's going to be different than the top set. And this 6 and 6 and 7 would be congruent. So we'd have two different sets of this group of 4 is different than this group of 4 if the lines are not parallel. 1 and 4 are congruent, 2 and 3 are congruent, 5 and 8 are congruent, and 6 and 7 are congruent. Okay, so what happens if that transversal T, I'm going to highlight it in purple, is going through lines that are parallel? So what happens if this time, if this is line M, and if this is line N, and I tell you that those lines are parallel to each other? So we start by knowing that M is parallel to N. Well, then special relationships get formed, which that's what this says right here. And what happens with those is that we have angle 1 and angle 4 are congruent because those are vertical. And then we have angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. But that same set of 4, I could pick up and copy to down here when those lines are parallel. Meaning I get to say that 1 and 4 are also going to be congruent to 5 and 8, and that 2 and 3 are also going to be congruent to 6 and 7. So let's mark that. All of these are congruent. Those are cute. All of those bigger ones that are yellow, those obtuse ones, are congruent to each other. So if I wanted to write that out, I could say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4, which is congruent to angle 5, which is congruent to angle 8. All of those are congruent. And then our pink ones are congruent as well. So angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, which is congruent to angle 6, and also to 7. Okay. So just looking at a picture and deciding which 4 must be congruent if we know for sure that the lines are parallel. So it does tell us that to start. It says that these lines are parallel to each other. And so since these lines are parallel to each other, the way that T is cutting these parallel lines creates these two different sets of angles that are congruent. So I'm going to do it in shapes actually. So all of these yellow star angles are going to be congruent. And then all of these purple angles are going to be congruent as well. So I'll do hearts there. All of those are going to be congruent as well. So all of the purple hearts are congruent. All of the yellow stars are congruent. Okay, so let's actually see that with some math. If we start by knowing that these lines are parallel, it tells me PR is parallel to SU, which means that those lines cross or face the same way. They're parallel, they never intersect. Then this transversal that's going through it is going to create these 8 angles. And it tells us that exactly one of those angles, OQR, O to Q to R, this angle right here is 100 degrees. So who else do I know that is going to be 100 degrees? Well, all of these other obtuse, meaning bigger than 90, angles, 100 degrees. All 4 of those are 100 degrees. Okay? So what does that mean about finding the other set of 4? Well, think back. We learned a long time ago that not only are vertical angles congruent, but linear pairs add up to 180 degrees. So how could we use the 180 and the 100 that we've already spent to find what's remaining? We are going to subtract 100 from 180. That gives me 80 degrees, and I get to fill that in for all of the other acute angles. So all 4 of those acute angles are 80 degrees. All 4 of those obtuse purple angles are 100 degrees. Okay, let's do that again. It tells us that these lines are parallel. Again, if it didn't tell us that, then we would not be able to do this. But it tells me that NMO is 60. N to M to O is 60. So who else is 60? Of course, all of these other acute angles are 60. So how do I find the yellow sets? I do 180, which is a straight line, and I subtract off 60. So how much is left? 120 degrees, which makes sense as an answer because that is obtuse, and those are in fact obtuse angles. So 120 for all of my other sets. Okay, now what they've done is they've turned these lines to be vertical. These lines are still going to be parallel. It tells us that they're parallel. So that now means that my transversal that's going through them crosses at V and at S. And so it tells us that UVS, U to V to S, this angle right here, is going to be 55. So what other angles are 55? That vertical angle and then these 2 acute angles up here are also going to be 55. So how do I find this other set? I do 180 minus 55, and that gives me 125 for all of these obtuse angles. So 125 fills in the other remaining 3 as well. Okay? All right. Last but not least, we've got a set of parallel lines. These lines are parallel, and it says GHF. That's this angle right here. This angle is 153 degrees. So who else is 153 degrees? I'm just going to copy it for all of those obtuse angles. And then that means that this remaining piece, together those make 180, so that should be 27 degrees. So that's going to be for all of my acute angles on this transversal, 27. Okay? The only thing we did not discuss that I do want to add is what if you've got a transversal that's going through parallel lines just like normal. So let's say the M is parallel to N. M is parallel to N. But what if I tell you that one of the angles formed with the transversal, T, is 90? What does that mean about the others? That means I can copy that here, here, and here. Well, what is left when you decide that these add up to 180 degrees, forming a straight line, linear pair? That means that what is left here is 90, so all of the other ones will be 90. So if one of the 8 is a 90-degree angle, then all 8 of them are 90. Every single one of these is equal to 90 degrees. So all of the blues are 90 and all of the reds are 90. And so you are going to practice this on IXL. Let me know if you have any questions and have a wonderful day.